Alright, so we are going to talk about the back squat, one of our first movements on our basic training program. So a couple key points I want to start on are what you always should start with. So it's in order. So the first thing you should always focus on with the back squat is how you're going to set up for the back squat. So your hook height, as in your J hooks, should always be the first thing you set up. So you typically want to set that up, I like to say collarbone or sternum height. So for me, this is a little low. I'm going to raise this up to about there. That's a little better. It's about sternum or collarbone height. If I go a little higher, I'm going to be on my tiptoes, and I don't want that. If I go on my tiptoes, I'm likely to miss when I'm putting back in the weight, especially if I get pretty heavy where I'm kind of almost bent over and compressed. So it's going to help prevent some misses if I get that hook height set just to the right height. Next thing I want you to think about is your safety catches. Your safety catches are these guys right here. You can find them on the inside of the rack. You pull it out. You want to set these up to about mid-thigh height, because typically when you get to the bottom of the squat, and if you can't get up and you come down, you'll be about there. So for me, I set that up right about there, about mid-thigh height. That way if I do come down and I can't get it, I'm right there. Okay? Just in case. You might not always need it, but it's always a just in case, you never know. It'll help prevent injuries. So first, hook height, second, safety catches. Now you're going to talk about the bar placement. On a back squat, there's actually two different placements that you hear about a lot. A high bar and a low bar. They have different emphases. Like our high bar, it's going to be a little bit more quad dominant compared to a lower bar, which is going to be more hip dominant. The reason why is because of our biomechanics. You know, you have something further away, it's going to have to compensate more going straight down compared to here. It's going to compensate through the hip more. So typically with the high bar placement, you're going to have that about just below the traps, kind of along the scap, the upper scap, right about here. Oh, gotta get another safety catch out, just in case. So what I'll do is I'll get that bar, and it'll go right here, right along the lower trap area, kind of along the scapula. It'll rest there. That's a high bar placement. For a low bar placement, it's going to sit a little lower. It's going to sit more on my shoulder and just below that area. So it'll look more like this. Maybe right there. That's a low bar. That's a high bar. It's a little bit different placement, and it has a slightly different emphasis. Coaches will use those interchangeably just based off what they want. Next thing we'll talk about is our feet placement. Now this is what I would argue as the most important part when you're doing any kind of squat movement. And so basically what I'm trying to say is how you place your feet, but also creating an arch. So when you squat, most people, we go about slightly outside the hip. That's how we coach it. But for some, it's slightly different. Some are more gonna keep their feet in tight. That's gonna be more quad dominant. Some go a little wider to get a little more hip emphasis. It all depends on one, what the coach wants, and two, what the coach is okay with. For me personally, I go slightly outside the hip, toes maybe slightly pointed out, but most importantly, grabbing the ground with my feet in that squat. I'll be there and I'm grabbing the ground. What that's gonna help me do is one, I'm not gonna have my arch break. If I have a loose arch, my knees can kind of come in. Compared to a set arch, helps me open up, widen my knees a little bit so it engages my hips sooner. That way I get good engagement through the whole movement. So I would argue this is probably the most important part of setting up for a squat. The next thing is your core bracing. So core brace, you know, the reason why we do it is because we need stability through our torso. If we don't have stability through our torso, we're likely to bow or break through our spine. And so I want you to think about keeping entire-like stability through your core. So essentially, creating tension as much as you can before you even go down in your descent. You're just gonna create tension, creating a nice brace, pushing out, kind of engaging everything around. Not just here, not just your abs, but your obliques, your erectors, your entire trunk is braced, creating a tire around your lower abdomen area. Okay? That's gonna help us just from not bowing, because that's where you see a lot of injuries happen with the back, where you get herniated disc or anything like that. Next thing, back engagement. I see this all too often where athletes are squatting and they let the bar, because they're moving it so fast, and it just comes off their back. What could happen if that happens is it could fly back and roll off. So what we want to do instead is engage, pulling down the bar, engaging our back as we start our squat. Okay, so that's kind of the basics on how to do a squat. Now I'm going to give you some demos of what I like. I will face you for this. This is not how we're going to have the athletes squat, but for the premise of learning, I'm going to face out. Okay? So I've got my J hooks set to collarbone or sternum height. I've got my safety catches set to mid-thigh height. I'll get my bar placement. I'm going to do a high bar squat. I'm going to set myself up, get it set nice and snug. I'll pick it off. I'll take a step. I'm going to get my feet placed just slightly outside the hip. I personally like my toes slightly pointed out. Now I'm going to engage my arch. See what this does with my knees? Kind of it brings them out already. I'm already creating tension in my hips. I'm going to keep my arch set the whole time. Next, engage my back, create tension in my trunk, and I'm going to squat down and back up. I'll get all my performance reps, and I'll rehook the bar, just like so. Okay? Big cues for you when you're coaching this movement is I like to first look at the feet. If I see some movement in the knee, I'm going to assume their arch is not set and they're not engaging their feet right. A lot of people say push the knees out, push the knees out. But really what it could be is their arch is not set and it's caving in. So start there. Get that foot engaged, which will in turn engage that hip right away because it's forcing the foot to rotate out, get that knee out. Okay, from there, you'll see a lot of times athletes will do what's called a butt wink, where you come down and you see this rotation through the pelvis. They'll come down and it'll just go like that. That's due to improper trunk engagement. You want to think about engaging the whole trunk, not just your abdomen, even your low back. You'll squat down, keeping that engaged, come back up, keeping that engaged. Prevents that butt wink-like movement, that flexion through the lumbar spine. Okay? Another thing you'll see is that bar coming off the back. They'll be squatting so fast, it'll come off. You know, we want to keep that bar nice and snug so it won't pop off and it won't slide off. I've seen athletes where they come up so fast and it hits on their back and they can't control it and it falls back. That's not just a danger for you as the athlete, but it's also a danger for the people around you. If someone's not paying attention, they're back here, the spotter's keeping an eye on them, and then it falls off and it, you know, let's say I'm standing right here and I'm kind of catching my breath, but the bar falls off, it can fall right on my foot and break my foot. So we want to make sure we keep it safe for everyone around us. Okay? So the big things as we're focusing on coaching a squat is setting up correctly to what the coach wants to for the bar placement, engaging our feet, getting a tire-like brace, and getting that back engagement, pulling that bar down.